One evening, all of the information that I had collected for years all came together one instant in time and revealed a truth to me that absolutely blew me away.
Dr. Bruce Lipton is a cellular biologist who focused his research on discovering how cells know what to do. In other words, he wondered how the brain of the cell controlled the rest of the cell. During the course of his research, he made an astounding discovery, one that changed the course of his life. We caught up with him at his home near Santa Cruz, California.
As a conventional biologist, I held the belief that I was just a mechanism and that my life was just the unfoldment of these molecules. And therefore, I really felt that I was an accident, just as Darwin would have said, that I accidentally got here and I'm an accident in the world. And basically, I was just trying to run my life in the best way I possibly can, figuring that I got dropped into this picture, I'm a machine, I'm here right now, and then at the end, I'm gone back into dust. So make the best I could of what I had.
Bruce Lipton continued his research into the cell. Like most biologists, he accepted the notion that genes control the behavior of a cell, that genes function as the cell's brain. But the results of his research varied so greatly from conventional scientific theory, he began to look for a different mechanism, a mechanism other than genes that controlled the cell.
And about 1985, after about 10 years of seeking alternative mechanisms, one evening, all of the information that I had collected for years all came together one instant in time and revealed a truth to me that absolutely blew me away.
On the island of Grenada, where he lived at the time, Dr. Lipton sat up late one night reviewing his research. Around 2 a.m., all of the information he had gathered gelled into a startling revelation.
The exciting part was just before this revelation came, I was working on the understanding of the mechanisms that actually control biology. And I found that by then I already knew that the control was in the skin of the cell, called the cell membrane, which is the equivalent of our skin, in fact. And that I was understanding the mechanism, so I had described the structure and function of the cell membrane and had come down to three different points, bullets about the understanding. And these points were: the cell membrane is a liquid crystal, the cell membrane is a semiconductor, and the cell membrane possesses gates and channels. So I write these down, sit back, and then read this and say, the membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And all of a sudden, my whole life changed, because I said, I've heard this phrase before, but it's not a biological phrase. And I tried to recall where did I hear this? And there on the left side of my desk was my first computer. And sitting right next to it was a book from Radio Shack, a simpleton book on understanding how my computer worked. And I opened up the book, and on page 3 in the introduction of this book is a description of a computer chip. A crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And all of a sudden, it just hit me. I said, the cell membrane is a computer chip. And the cell nucleus, where the genes are, is a hard drive where the genes were programs. And all of a sudden, it became perfectly clear that the environment was typing on the keyboard, which is the surface of the cell, drawing up programs from the genes to match the environmental signals. So as I perceive the environment, I select genes that will adjust my physiology and my body to meet that perception. The significance? What I believe is what I become.
When Bruce Lipton realized the source of control over his cells came from outside his body instead of inside, it changed his entire perspective of reality and gave him a new understanding of God.
Before this revelation, so to speak, my concepts regarding God and spirit were pretty much like most scientists, and that is that there might be a God, there might be spirit, but it wasn't necessary to invoke them to understand life. So scientists don't necessarily deny there's a God, but really suggest that if there's a God, God's probably busy doing other things, and that life can be understood just by the molecules and the mechanism. But after this understanding, it really revealed that there was much more to me than this physical reality, that there was an energy, a spirit, or a God that was controlling this biology that I was experiencing.
With this new understanding, Dr. Lipton felt he had discovered, in a sense, the secret of life. And his excitement over that discovery brought about dramatic change.
As a scientist, I work in my head doing all kinds of calculations, data, and all the experimental understanding, hypotheses, etc. But by the moment this realization of the mechanism of what actually controls life, when that actually hit me, there was a complete and profound physiological change in my body that I went from my head into my heart. Then the joy was so overwhelming that tears started to well up in my eyes, and I was feeling very choked up all about it. It was interesting because as a scientist, as I said, having been in my head all my life, this entrance into my heart changed my whole outlook and expression of life, and it was so peaceful. And the peace that came over me was, for the first time, I actually saw that I was more than just this body.
For Bruce Lipton, the biology of a cell persuaded him that God exists. When we come back, we'll meet a former atheist whose pathway to God began with a study of physics.
People who would talk to me about their religious dogma, I would just be so dismissive of. I couldn't understand how they didn't see that that was simply a naive and ignorant belief to which they subscribed to assuage their fear of death.
We learned English.
Your kids can too.
Just watch Hello Channel.
I was, without a doubt, the most arrogant and supercilious atheist who ever existed. I was like the recent ex-smoker who walks up to other smokers and tells them how they're wrong and they should stop doing it and how I've learned so I know they can learn.
How does one become an atheist? Why does a person get so committed to disbelief in God they want to change the mind of everyone they know? What could possibly have made Christine Casey, when she was 13 years old, reject the very existence of God?
My father at that time was an alcoholic, and a pretty abusive alcoholic, and it was a real struggle to deal with that. I remember after a particularly harsh confrontation, I vividly remember turning to my mother with tears in my eyes and saying, "If a God exists that lets this kind of thing happen to people, that's not a God I'm willing to believe in." And that was it. That was the break. It was that abrupt a decision for me.
Her mother, a conservative Christian, was dismayed by Christine's decision. She hoped Christine would find peace and comfort through faith in God. But Christine found the comfort she needed not in her mother's church, but in the intellectual pursuit of science.
Science did not judge me. And in the same way that I had been taught that God and religious dogma judged us as individuals. Science only judged the world as it saw it. And so there was sort of an intellectual egalitarianness to science and scientific study. And it was incredibly appealing to me. It was calming, it was non-confrontational, and it was about the world around us rather than the world inside us.
In college, Christine took a physics major and delighted in challenging any religious person who happened to cross her path.
People who would talk to me about their religious dogma, I would just be so dismissive of. I couldn't understand how they didn't see that that was simply a naive and ignorant belief to which they subscribed to assuage their fear of death.
Content in her scientific worldview, everything was fine for Christine until one day, in physics class, something happened.
So I'm sitting in an undergrad physics class, and my professor is doing an example and showing us how basically rocket propulsion works and equal and opposite forces and etc. He's taken a red wagon, and he has strapped a fire extinguisher to it, and he sits down and mounts the red wagon, and he's holding onto the handle, and he's holding onto the nozzle of the fire extinguisher and hitting it, and of course that's making him fly, accelerate across the room. Basic propulsion, basic natural laws. And I remember asking him why. Well, why does this work? And he said, this is how it works. And I said, well, great, I get that this is how it works, and I understand how the math defines that. But why does it do that? Why does it consistently do that? And he said, Christine, science doesn't tell us why. Science just tells us how. I was stunned. So I spent several months in a great deal of confusion after this epiphany, until eventually I realized that whatever it is that we believe strongly in requires an element of faith. So in a lot of ways, I've actually moved away from science. In being able to make a decision to place my faith where I chose, science became relegated to a more natural and simple place in my life. And that was fine. That was good. It still has a beautiful value for me. When I look up at the stars at night and I think about the natural forces that define their movement and their relationship to each other, that's very awe-inspiring to me. And it's inspiring to me that we as human beings can understand a little of it. It is equally inspiring to me that those natural forces are in some way elements of God. They're elements of the whole universe that we can't yet define and that we can't yet understand, but that is out there for us to discover.
Christine has come a long way, from an abusive childhood, through atheism, and finally to spirituality and God. Through it all, she has maintained her love for science. She also says that faith in something greater than herself helps her overcome fear, even the fear of abuse. We asked her how she sees God now, in a world where pain is so prevalent.
I reconcile the simultaneous existence of pain in the world and God really easily today. I think that as human beings, and especially in our Western culture, we're taught that pain is an awful thing to be avoided at all costs, and that comfort is the thing to be sought. But the truth is that pain is opportunity. Given that it's unavoidable, it's an incredible opportunity to learn and to grow and to become the very best of who we are. A very trivial example is me, my weight. I'm a big girl. And as a big girl in very thin society, there are certain kinds of things that I've had to deal with, like prejudice and, I go out riding my bike and obscenities getting yelled from pickup trucks and, things like that are incredibly hurtful in their way, but they've made me the kind of strong and more compassionate person that I am today. And I kind of like the person that I am.
Science taught Christine Casey that she could choose her belief system. She chose to believe in God, and that enabled her to live a life without fear. When we come back, we'll talk to Hyveth Williams about her pathway from politics to God.
Hello.
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 Hello. Hello.
Hyveth Williams was a prominent government official in the city of Hartford, Connecticut. While running for mayor there, she went through a deeply disturbing period of her life that transformed her priorities. Now her ultimate goal is to be the chaplain of the United States Senate. Hyveth, it is a delight to have you here.
I am very pleased to be here with you.
This story begins in politics. I mean, you're into city politics?
Yes.
How did that start?
It started with a dare to the mayor. I had a talk show on a radio station, and he had only recently taken over the position. He was deputy mayor and was now acting mayor, waiting for the elections, and I thought he wasn't doing a good job. And so on my radio program, I said I could do his job with a blindfold and my hands tied behind my back.
That night.
His police officer happened to be tuning the radio as he was driving him in the limousine when I came on saying these things, and he changed his direction and drove to the station and walked into the station and yanked the microphone and said, "I dare you to do it. I take you on." And of course, the phones lit up, and the station manager, that was the best thing that could have happened. And so we took the dare for 3 weeks. He became mayor,
Oh,
and I worked
mayor.
for him as his executive assistant for 8 or 9 years, ran his campaigns, did just about everything. And then at the end of that time period, I decided I should have done what I started out to do in the beginning and run against him. And then this incredible thing happened to me where God came into my life.
In the middle of politics?
In the middle of a political campaign.
How could that be?
I don't know, because I didn't believe in God at all. I was an atheist, and I was known around town to be an atheist. There were people who claimed to be Christians who would come to my office, and I would just laugh at them and call them Jesus freaks. And then I started hearing voices, and then it was crazy. Because
When you say hearing voices.
I have told this story over and over again to my embarrassment and humiliation, but I was being interviewed by the local TV station, and suddenly I heard out in the heavens, Hiveth, and so I'm talking to this fella like I'm talking to you, and then I looked up and said, "What?"
Is
And
that right?
and so my friends and I thought that I had flipped, thought that I had gone crazy,
Sure.
and so we all agreed that the best thing for me to do was to just secretly go and admit myself into the Institute of Living, which is the mental hospital near my home in the city. And we were really determined to do that, except that God sent someone with a Bible to me before I went to the mental institution.
When you say God sent someone knocked on your door?
No,
or showed
no,
up in
it
your
didn't
life,
happen
or-
that way.
Yeah?
I was one day in the office, you know, the mayor and I were now having a political battle. And so he invited me in the office with the personnel director, and I was in his face. I was bold and brassy, and I was in his face just cussing, just carrying on. And the personnel director said, "Do you not know that a soft answer turneth away wrath?" And that just really tore inside of me, just made all the difference to me. And I asked him, did you get those words? And he gave me a red King James Bible, and I read it from cover to cover.
So, Hiveth, you hear these voices.
Yes, I believe it was the voice of God.
How long did it take you to come to that conviction that, in fact, that was God calling you?
It took perhaps about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. I went through a period, I had a very unusual experience where I couldn't speak at all. I had no voice and I could not frame words. For about 2 weeks, I had to write everything. When I came out of it, in order to speak words, I had to change the pattern of my speech so it wouldn't hurt. And I think God was simply just cleaning up my mouth in a very drastic way because I deserved it, really.
You go through a crisis,
Yes.
but it's not a personal encounter yet, really a deeply personal relationship yet.
No,
So
no.
how does that come into your life?
One of the times, I'll give you one experience. One of the times I was laying in bed and I felt myself slipping away into a deep, deep, subconscious, unconscious state. And I saw myself step outside of my body. And I know this is really eerie for some people, but this is what I experienced, and I need to tell the truth as to how I experienced it then. And most people say that when this happens, they see the light and, you know, their life
Right,
flashes in front of them. That didn't happen to me.
No lights.
No lights, no life flashing by in a panoramic scene, except a list of ice cream flavors. Can you believe this?
Ice cream
A
flavors.
list of ice cream flavors. That's all that I saw. And I started screaming, I haven't had pistachio. I haven't had mud pie. I want to live so I can eat these flavors.
Have mercy.
And so in the time of crying this out, I heard a voice. And I knew then it was not a normal human voice. I heard this voice say to me, "If you follow me, I will give you life everlasting." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You will know that I spoke to you because from now on, wherever you go, you will find a rose." There has never been a place that I've been that I have not. Even in the deepest winter, I've been in Nebraska when everything is covered with snow, and I've found a flower. I was walking one day, I was really down in the dumps, and I went to the lake, Lake Michigan, and I was just walking on the beach. It was covered with snow. I was walking on the lake front. Everything was snow. The water was covered. And I'm trudging along and I'm just depressed and I'm saying, "God, what do you want with my life? Why do you do this to me? Why do you put me through these terrible things?" Some people don't even believe me that I'm telling the truth. And I'm walking along and right there on the beach, in the middle of the snow, is this rose. And I just knew that God had spoken to me and that he called me. And
Beautiful.
it's just...
So your life has never been the same since.
My life has never been the same since.
In the midst of all of this, what leads you to believe God cares?
Because every person that's been born on the earth, whether they've accepted Him as God or not, are His children. We're all His children, and He loves us. He cares. He wants to protect us. He wants to deliver us. He wants to give us peace and life and safety. He wants us to be free to think and be creative and to live, to have abundant life. He is incredible. He has all of these things, and He wants to give them to us just like now. He's been giving them to me. That's why I'm appealing to anybody who's watching. Take my word for it. I didn't read this in a book. I wasn't taught this at the seminary. I am telling you what I know for sure. This I know. I will die by this. I know this to be true.
Ivat, it's been a real pleasure to have you on The Evidence.
Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Would you like to know more about the stories of our guests that you've seen on today's show? You can find out by visiting our website. It's one word, theevidence.org, O-R-G. We'll be right back after this.
Learn English on your level, in your home, on your schedule. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new way to learn English as you build a better future. Join us and say hello.
After listening to people talk about their journey toward faith, it's clear that we choose our belief system more than it chooses us. It's not just something that gets dumped on us. It's a conscious choice, a choice that we're responsible to make. People like Bruce Lipton, Christine Casey, and Hyveth Williams show us that what we choose to believe makes a difference in the way we live our lives. Believing that we're the products of blind, mechanistic forces will take us one way. Believing that we are the creation of a loving God will take us another. Believing that our destiny is confined to right here and right now, that we just have to run our lives as best we can, will take us one way. Believing that we have a destiny that transcends history will take us another. When it comes down to a choice between putting my faith in chance or putting my faith in God, the choice is clear. I choose God. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.